TJ Lang, for many years, was our nemesis, our arch rival. He played on the line for the Green Bay Packers, and there was a show or two that we would have him on and make some Hawks Red Wings bet because he was from the Detroit area originally. And then he ended his career playing for the Detroit Lions, his hometown team. Now he is J-Mac of the Lions. He does the sidelines for the Detroit Lions radio network. So like Mark Tauscher, his former teammate, he is in the radio business. TJ Lang joins us right now on the Waddle and Silvy Show. TJ, it's been too long. How have you been?
I've been good, man. Yeah, it's been a while ever since that Wings-Hawks rivalry's kind of dead over the past 7 or 8 years.
Yeah,
but
not so much.
no, I'm doing well, guys. And like you said, being on sideline, I was in the booth this year for most of the games and getting to watch good football. Obviously, getting to watch your guy, right, Ben Johnson, up and close for the last couple years. I know you guys are excited, man. I know Lions fans are, a little torn. I mean, everybody's happy that Ben got an opportunity, no doubt. But, obviously when the body's still cold after a devastating playoff loss, you're going to lose your coordinator. And then it's like, oh, wait, to a division rival? Like, what else can get worse? But that's just a testament to Ben, man. I mean, people wouldn't be upset if, you weren't losing a big piece of your team. And good for him and good for Chicago. I think Ben is a heck of a coach, man, so it's going to be a good challenge for him up there.
Give us a detailed scouting report on Ben Johnson, TJ, if you can.
Well, I think the one thing that a lot of guys, in that locker room when I talk to them about Ben is he is just so over demanding when it comes to details, right? I mean, he does – we all see what he does, a couple plays a game when it comes to, some trick plays and some of the things that he designs – that you look at and you're like, where does this come from? Like, how much time does this guy have to just draw up these plays? But really with Ben, it's about the details. That offense, and we know they had some really great players, right, the last couple of years, really at every position on that offense. But it comes to the details and how demanding he is and challenging he is for everybody to know every single responsibility out there, right? And I can relate with that because that's how my time in Green Bay was. I mean, we used to get challenged by the coaches, teammates, everybody to make sure, offensive line, make sure you know what the receiver's job is, right? Like, just kind of expand your knowledge into what everybody's doing. I think Ben has nailed that over the past couple seasons, especially since he took over the play calling, going back, I think it was 2.5 years ago. And he's a football guy. He reminds me of, and I've only met Tom Brady a couple of times, but when you hear Tom Brady talk football, like, there's like a nerdy passion that comes out, and a lot of normal fans are like, well, what is he like gigging out about, right? Some of the ways that he explains things, you're like, man, like, this dude just loves ball, right? Like, Ben Johnson to me has a lot of the same characteristics where he doesn't shut it off. Like, I don't even think he has an off season, Ben. I think when he goes every single day, every minute, every hour is into, like, how can I make this team better? How can I be more creative? How can I put my guys in better positions, this day or, this play or this formation? So he is one of the hardest working guys. And I'll be honest with you. I mean, I think this is a question I asked Waddle, and you would know being in the locker room too, like, coaching the players, you want the most information that matters the most, right? Like, sometimes coaches can get a little bit over. They can give you some stats or like some details that, like, okay, is that really going to matter on this play? Like, give me the stuff that I really need. I think Ben has nailed that, and he's kind of found a way in his super advanced, scheme that he runs. When you talk to players, he actually finds a way to simplify it down to its purest form to where everybody can understand it, right? And I think that he's done a great job of kind of commanding that offense too and being in front of that room. I think his first year when he was doing it, a lot of guys were like, yeah, he's kind of awkward when he's up there talking, but everything you've heard this year is like, man, like, he has found a way to stand up there, command the room, get the respect of the guys, and obviously, give them every detail possible to know what they have to do to be successful, know what they have to do to understand the philosophy and what we're trying to do as an offense. I think he has absolutely perfected that.
Talking to TJ Lang, who played for the Packers and the Lions. He won a Super Bowl with the Packers. He's a two-time Pro Bowler, and he's now on the Lions radio network, and he knows Ben Johnson as he's watched him there the last few years. So, TJ, you played for Mike McCarthy, and we asked this to Tausch, but you have the unique aspect of watching Ben Johnson in Detroit and being a guy who grew up rooting for the Lions. And for Tausch, it was easy. He's like, guys, you want McCarthy. McCarthy's the guy who has been there and done that. You don't want to project with the future guy. Who would you say, like, the Bears really were considering McCarthy? Did they make the right move hiring Ben Johnson?
Oh, man, throwing me on the spot. Well, I don't ever like giving Chicago sports any sort of credit. So, yeah, of course I'm going to say they made the wrong move, and I hope I'm right on that. No, I think they – look, and I was getting asked about that last week too. Mike obviously was an intriguing choice because of, you know, the success that he's had, obviously the experience and being in a division for so long, right? So I think those were some positives that Mike could have brought. But, look, I don't know. I mean, look at the way that the NFL has kind of turned over the past, you know, I don't know, call it, 7 years, where the hot thing, the in-style thing is let's try to find a young offensive-minded coach that can come in and kind of figure things out, right? And I think that if you're Chicago, you're probably thinking that, especially with the roster that you have, right? Especially with Caleb Williams. You got a guy who's, you know, going to be a second-year quarterback. So I think that, yes, having a younger presence, somebody that has Mike has grown up with that West Coast offense, right, and the old Bill Walsh and all that stuff, and he's still kind of, you know, back in the day old school type coach. I don't think there's anything wrong with that, but I think that when you look at today's NFL offenses, a lot of these teams have to cater to what these quarterbacks are being taught in college, right? It's a lot of one read. Hey, how can we mix with the formations and the motions and try to get advantage here or there? It's not really that old school play anymore. So I think if you're Chicago, when you consider who you have on your roster, it makes sense to go with the younger coach who has experience in the modern, who has perfected kind of that modern NFL offensive approach these days, right? I could say it could be different. I mean, if Chicago's looking at a veteran quarterback over there and somebody that's been around 12, 13 years, do you want a more experienced coach when it comes to that? Maybe that's the way you want to go. But I think when you're trying to match up and synchronize the play caller, the head coach, your offensive, you know, Ben's going to, I imagine, still call the plays with a young quarterback. I think that's not a bad option to have. So, but I like Mike too. I mean, I still hope he gets a shot somewhere. I think he's still relevant in today's NFL. But I think it's just too hard for me to say, you know, which way they should have gone. And that's the beauty about the football, right? Time will tell.
TJ, how good is Hank Fraley at his job, and how likely is it that Ben may be able to bring him with him to Chicago and elevate him to the OC?
Well, is that a rumor? I know Hank was.
I'm starting it right now.
Yeah,
TJ,
we've been starting
the rumor
it, yes.
because I want to talk it into reality.
That. Okay, so do I want to dive and play your guys' hypothetical game? Okay,
absolutely.
I'll indulge you guys a little bit. I know Hank was. It sounded like he was getting some interviews from Seattle, yes. I think, for the same thing, offensive coordinator. And, yeah, I guarantee you there's going to be guys on this Lions staff that Ben is going to want to bring with him. I love Hank Fraley. I played 2018 was my last year. Hank was our assistant offensive line coach at the time, obviously with Patricia, and then a holdover from Dan Campbell. And there's a reason for that. I mean, he is a heck of a coach. He understands the type of players he has. He understands how to get the most out of each individual guy. Like, I think that, Waddle, I don't know if you would say the same, but there's too many coaches that were like, they treat everybody the same, right? They just want you to be robotic. Hank has found a way to individualize his coaching strategy. What he's telling Taylor Decker to do isn't the same thing he's telling Penei Sewell to do, right? Like, you got to find each guy's strength, weaknesses. Okay, how can we approach this? Boom, let's go. He understands offensive line play. And honestly, I think being with Ben Johnson over the past couple years as well, watching his approach to the game, watching his approach to putting the offense in such good positions has elevated some of those strengths that Hank has. There's not a lot of time. I could tell you, sitting in the offensive line room, man, we weren't going over routes. We weren't going over every single formation and the depth that these guys had to get on, you know, an in route or a crossing route or the little details. But Hank was always one of those guys that understood that. And he would kind of incorporate that into the coaching style too. Hey, guys, I know it's a 3-step drop, but the details on the routes are going to be this. So it's really going to be, 3.5 steps. So, let's be careful here. That was always part of his game where I think he's acquired a lot of skills, not only playing the game, but coaching with some of these offensive coaches that probably are going to set him up if he does get an opportunity to be a successful offensive coordinator. So, and look at it. I mean, if you go with Ben Johnson, I think Hank has done a tremendous job of also demanding high expectation from his group of guys in the offensive line room. And you can read some quotes that, Frank Ragnow and Decker and those guys have all said about him,
Right.
like they would be devastated if he leaves. But the good part, I think, if Hank were to get that opportunity, I hope he doesn't, and I don't think he wants to leave. Let's start with there. I hope he doesn't. But you get to go with Ben, who's obviously going to call the plays, right? So I don't want to say there's going to be less responsibility, but anytime you're an offensive coordinator and the head coach is the guy calling plays, it allows you to take on some different tasks, right? So that'll be an interesting name to keep an eye on. But I assume Ben is going to have some connections with some guys that he's been coaching with over the last couple of years that he's going to want to bring along as well.
Yeah. We're talking to T.J. Lang, the former Packer and Lion, who now does reporting and analyst work for the Lions radio network. He was a Pro Bowler, was also a Super Bowl champion. So you mentioned, it piqued my interest, TJ, when you mentioned Matt Patricia. You played for Matt Patricia. You played and you've watched Dan Campbell, two former first-time head coaches who've gone in different directions. Matt Patricia was a big failure as a first-time head coach, but was a very successful defensive coordinator. Dan Campbell, no one would have guessed would have been a very successful head coach. What are the pitfalls of guys who come with a lot of hype as first-time coaches, and what are the traps that they could fall into and the reasons why they don't succeed?
Well, I think the biggest pitfall and the biggest trap is coming in and saying, hey, guys, this is how we did it over there, and we had a lot of success, and you guys got to do it the way we did it. Like, players don't want to hear that. You know what I mean? Like, when we were in Detroit, nobody in that locker room gave a damn what guys in New England were doing, right? Nobody cared that, hey, those guys won Super Bowls and those guys did this, blah, blah. We want to know, how are you going to help us get better, right? So I think that can be a trap that some coaches can fall into. And that's not only Matt Patricia. I've seen it with a lot of coaches throughout the years. Like, you got to do it the way these guys are doing it. That's just the wrong approach. I think if you get off to a bad start, that's really hard to overcome. And that's kind of how it was, I think, in Detroit when Patricia came in. It had this feeling of, like, you guys don't know how to win. I know how to win. You got to – and it's like, okay, man, like, we're just getting off to, really rocky start here. I don't think Ben's that type of guy. I don't think he's going to go in there and say, hey, look at all the success we have. Like, you guys got to start, whatever, however he wants to frame it. The bottom line is the players, anytime you get a new coach, obviously with high stature and people that are going to be excited about, you're excited to learn from him. You're excited to work together. You're excited to do it as a collaborative effort. I think some of the pitfalls could be, it starts to feel like it's players versus the staff, right? And that's something that obviously is a recipe for disaster. Now, with Dan Campbell, he came in, and I know he took some heat early on about, some of the sound bites that he was talking about and the kneecaps and, all the little things that really don't matter. But the bottom line is, I think anytime you have a coach with high expectations and when the standard and when responsibilities are going to be clearly defined, and you're going to have consistency with the way you approach every single day, that's what the players want the most. And I think that Ben Johnson has obviously seen that firsthand, right? He was here. He was with Patricia's staff. He was carried over from Dan Campbell's staff. He knows really what it takes to have a turnaround, right? He does. He got to sit in first class and watch that thing and be a part of it and be a collaborative part of some of the decisions that they were making to turn the franchise around. I can't imagine he wouldn't take some of those skills that he's learned over the past couple of years and incorporate that into what he wants to do with Chicago. And obviously I saw the little clip today that the team put out, and I think Ben kind of acknowledged that right off the bat. He said, look, guys, it's going to be a challenge, right? It's going to be a challenge. He understands what the division is with Minnesota and Detroit and Green Bay. He knows it's going to be a challenge. But I think as long as he utilizes some of those skills that he has built over the past couple years and what he was able to do, the part that he played with obviously getting Detroit out of the dumps and getting them to one of the top teams, he's going to utilize that in Chicago too. And he's got. I mean, I know they underperformed there a little bit, but he's got some young talent that I think is really exciting when you start talking about his offensive philosophy and the opportunity that they have in Chicago to maybe fast forward that I don't even call it a rebuild, but that bounce back a little bit. I think he's got the tools to fast forward that a little bit.
With that in mind, TJ, you've had an opportunity to see our offensive line a couple of times a year for the last several years. Knowing what you see, how much trouble are we in with the group that is out there currently, and how much do they need to be fixed?
Well, I mean, that's obviously goal number one, right? And whether that's Ben working with Ryan Poles or how much responsibility he has bringing some guys in, that's going to be job number one. Because as much credit as we give Ben Johnson, I think a lot of people, especially here in Detroit, sometimes you forget that football is about the players too, right? So let's not act like Ben Johnson was the only coach that could have had success with some of the talent that the Lions had on offense. Obviously, with their offensive line and some playmakers that they had helped that. But a big part of that, like you just mentioned, was the offensive line. I mean, Ben Johnson's offense is run off of running the ball. It's run off of the play-action game, right? I think we've seen times in the Lions' offense last couple of years where if they're forced to throw the ball 40 times, 45 times, that's not a recipe to have success. So that's going to be a biggest challenge for them, I think, in Chicago, first and foremost, is you're right, building that offensive line so Ben can do what he wants to do, and he can build the type of system that he needs to build. But they do, with that being said, I mean, like I said, Ben's a very detailed guy. And when I watch some of the Chicago film throughout the past couple of years and their offensive line play, I don't think it's a massive lack of talent. You just look at some of the things and you're like, man, like they're just not very detailed in what they're doing. They're just not very detailed in some of the combo blocks or some of the communication. That should be pretty simple. So I don't want to say that was maybe anything negative on the coaching staff there in Chicago, but that's going to be something that I know Ben is going to harp on. He's going to harp on.
So seriously, Hank can clean that up,
yeah,
right? TJ,
well,
Hank Fraley can clean that up.
On Hank.
Oh, we're back to the hypotheticals. Yeah, I mean, I guess he could. I just don't see a world where it happens. But I texted. I was talking to our mutual friend too here. I don't know if Ben Johnson's gonna be very happy finding out that one of your guys' biggest fans isn't even from Chicago. So I know you guys are talking about that too. My buddy Big Cat, I'm giving him a little bit of trouble there.
Yeah. What'd you think of that? He's on with us tomorrow. So.
I texted him and I said the Trojan horse plan is commencing, boys. Let's go.
He was thrilled with what the Patriots did hiring Vrabel, though. To his credit, I mean,
yeah, I did kind of remind him what Indy did when they hired Josh McDaniels at one time, and then it lasted for like a day.
Right.
So I'm still holding out hope. I think that maybe Ben has that ultimate plan.
That's great.
I'm excited, but I love Big Cat, man. I love giving him some trouble too, obviously. But no, it's exciting times, obviously, for you guys, right? Everybody in Chicago, and getting hopefully getting one right. Because I know, as much slack as I like to give Chicago fans, this division, this rivalry is always so much better when all the teams are humming, man.
Because we're teammates. We work for the same company as Tauscher does, and all he does is give us crap. Yeah. We need the tide to turn, TJ. So,
yeah, I'm with you. Hey, I'm with you, man. I think that this is. Well, it's kind of disappointing, though. The NFC North kind of felt like the SEC this year, where, some big name teams, and then it's like, man, what happened, dude? But this division's so much fun, man, when all these teams are humming.
TJ, great stuff. Thanks, always appreciate your time. Thank you.
All right, Waddle, Silvy, good to catch up with you guys.
You got it. There you go. TJ Lang, longtime Packer. He was a two-time Pro Bowler. He was a Super Bowl champion there, and now he works on the Lions radio network. Good stuff with TJ.
Absolutely. And tell Hank Fraley that we called, okay?
That's right.
Just tell him that we called and we're interested in a call back.
Right.
We're thinking about him, yeah.
No.
Do we need to send him anything?
One of these shirts?
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, I don't know if these are going to work.